Let's get into today's question. It goes, I really don't understand why DEXs or decentralized exchanges are supposed to be so important. As a newbie, 9 months in, I had to create an account from a centralized exchange. Then if I want to use a DEX, I need to transfer a token to it. Once my DEX is funded, I understand how to use it, but to take profits, I need to go back to the centralized exchange again. So really, what's the point? Good question. It's definitely something I'm sure a lot of people who are new to cryptocurrencies are wondering themselves. There's a lot of reasons why I believe personally that decentralized exchanges will prove to be very important in the future for our free interaction in cryptocurrencies, particularly if you are a citizen of a country that is especially tight with the regulations on how they think you should be allowed to interact with cryptocurrencies. But right off the bat, this concept of what do you need a decentralized exchange for if you already have an account with a centralized exchange, fair enough. If you're only interested in buying something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, or maybe the top 10 coins that are listed according to their market cap on, let's say, CoinGecko.com, any of the top 10 coins there, most of those, if not all of them, are pretty readily available on any centralized exchange, even if those exchanges are based in the US. So if that's your goal with crypto, you might not have to use a decentralized exchange, especially if you're not concerned with going through KYC, fully reporting everything you're doing with cryptocurrencies, and you're not worried about giving away your very sensitive personal information to those centralized exchanges and the third parties that are often dealing with that information. That's a whole other rabbit hole we can get into. But if that's your basic goal with cryptocurrencies, you might find that you don't need a decentralized exchange. But especially if you are a CT Club member and you are based in the US, or you're in any country where you don't have access to an exchange that allows you as much free reign as possible on a centralized exchange. For example, Binance.us versus Binance.com, you'll find that the coins listed there are very different numbers. Much less are listed on Binance.us. If you are interested in purchasing cryptocurrencies that are undiscovered or micro cap, these small coins that aren't so readily available to the public, ideally you want to purchase these early, because then you get to see those huge price appreciations that we've seen with coins like Solana, like Matic, like AVAX. For example, a lot of these started off pretty vaguely, and a lot of them were only available on decentralized exchanges. Furthermore, if your main concerns are to ultimately take your profits from cryptocurrencies and send those profits right back into that traditional financial system, also known as your bank, then yeah, you're going to need a centralized exchange, most likely, to facilitate that. At the end of this video, please stick around. I will be listing decentralized exchanges that work both crypto to crypto and options that allow you to make things like bank transfers to cash out your crypto in exchange for fiat with zero, or at least with very minimal KYC options. But before we get into that, I do just want to touch on this concept of regulations. A lot of people seem to be on board with bringing in as many regulations as possible for cryptocurrencies because that is going to weed out the scammers. I think this is a lesson that many of you will hopefully learn sooner rather than later, is that regulations often appease those self-interests of the people who are working with the regulators directly, governments, central banks, etc. Which is why most of these regulators actually are definitely focusing much more on stable coins than other issues happening in cryptocurrencies. But that's a whole other story as well. I just want to clear this up, is that regulators, basically, they're going to say that they're trying to protect the little guy, protect the retail investor from scams. So if an exchange, if a centralized exchange is functioning within, let's say, the jurisdiction of the United States, and the United States has these regulations where coins cannot be listed on these exchanges unless they meet certain criteria. That coin cannot be listed on an exchange based in the US. You, as a US citizen, cannot get exposure to that coin because that centralized exchange is operating within the US. And they have to play by the rules that the US has set. That does not mean that you as an individual, you still very much have the right to take as much risk as you want. The thing is that regulations means that these centralized platforms don't have the ability to make that risk available to you. If they made that risk available to you, they would suffer the consequences of maybe violating the regulations put in place by the government under which they are operating. So, for those of you who have been nervous, as if, say, you're a US citizen again, you've been nervous to use a decentralized exchange because you don't think you're allowed to buy a coin because that coin isn't listed on a US-based exchange. Again, for example, let's say Coinbase or Gemini or Kraken or Binance.us. You're not going to be in trouble for buying a coin that isn't listed on those exchanges. Those exchanges would be in trouble if they made those available to you. That's just an example. So anyway, long story short is that for those of you who are really getting into crypto and you're learning the restrictions that you might have based on whatever citizenship you happen to have been born into, and you want to be able to participate as freely as you can in this cryptocurrency space, this beautifully evolving and disruptive cryptocurrency space, you're going to have to learn how to use decentralized exchanges. So there are a few, like I mentioned before earlier, these are three examples of decentralized exchanges that work with your bank. You can do bank transfers. So the first one here is Shapeshift. Classic decentralized exchange actually became more decentralized over time. This one is run by Eric Voorhees, a really decent proponent for cryptocurrencies online and the online presence. So a fan of his. This one, if you want to do through bank transfers or through fiat, you're going to have to go through some KYC. Paxful is also another option here, but again, you have a lifetime limitation of the amount of money that you can be exchanging with on this account unless you go through more additional KYC levels. So there is some KYC free wiggle room there, but not much. And lastly, we have BISQ, B-I-S-Q. This one is not the most user-friendly, but it is the most robust and decentralized exchange that I've come across thus far. You do use bank information, but BISQ does not have a centralized server. They are not run by a CEO. They have a decentralized autonomous organization that works together to make improvements to the code. Any information that you are submitting to BISQ, you're not really submitting anything. It runs locally as an application on your computer. So any information that you are inputting is only being saved on your own computer. It's not being shared with any centralized servers owned by BISQ or whatever. So that is what actually makes BISQ very robust. I look forward to the day when this one becomes maybe a bit more user-friendly. Maybe they can add some automatic market-making mechanism within BISQ to make the liquidity better. For those of you who might be interested in this option, the highest volumes are often found between Bitcoin and Monero, for example, or maybe Bitcoin and USD, depending on your location and who you can link up with to make bank transfers with. Now I'm going to get into a